I happened to find myself, just like alone with Meryl, she literally goes, when you're in your close-up, that's what matters. Your close-up is where you take your truth. That's where and someone walks in and was like, Meryl, just so you know, the tea, they've put Manuka honey out. And she was like, oh, wonderful. And she gets up, and I was like, oh. Pitch Perfect series.
You're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my hair. You're gonna miss me everywhere. Oh, I know you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.
On the first Pitch Perfect, I had told them I could do this cup thing for the audition scene because originally Kay Cannon had written it as I auditioned with I'm a Little Teacup, which again, every time I see her, I just saw her. I always want to ask her, how did you imagine that playing? Because I'm not sure I would have known how to do that. I, said I could do this thing with the cup, whatever. Little did we know it would be a thing that to this day, parents come up to me and they're like, my kid won't stop doing the cups thing. And I'm like, I really am. I'm so sorry. I owe every parent a drink one day. But then even when I actually recorded the full song for the album, which again, at the time I was like, I don't know if anybody will want this. And then they wanted to make like a full length song. And I was like, whatever you guys want, it's your time. I'll do it. And then that gets played on the radio for a year. It was so weird. It was a very weird time.
We sing all over the world and we compete in national championships.
On purpose?
I think that in the first movie, and I talked to the director, Jason Moore, about this before we even started filming. I was like, obviously Becca's kind of grouchy, but I was like, I really think the only reason that we buy into her is if she really falls in love with these girls. Even though this is kind of a normal comedy thing, when the other girls are being strange, that I don't kind of roll my eyes at them, that I find it pretty charming in my own kind of grouchy way. And it created very funny dynamics. I think even in the last movie, there's a scene where I'm debating whether or not I should have this solo career or whatever. And at the end of the scene, we were supposed to do this kind of group hug. And it feels tricky to just get into something like that.
Don't.
We should give her one.
I realized that if I started to signal, I can tell you fuckers want to hug me, and don't you get away from me. The more that I resisted, the more that they could lean into the pleasure of tormenting me. I think we got a lot of mileage out of how much that character continued to resist actually saying, I love you guys. But yeah, trying to show that all that love was there, but play up how much she was embarrassed by that. The Twilight Saga.
She's got a great spike, huh? I'm Jessica, by the way. Hey, you're from Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Aren't people from Arizona supposed to be really tan?
When the first Twilight was coming together, I auditioned for Catherine Hardwicke, and I had met Catherine actually at the Sundance Film Festival she was on the jury, and she had been a part of the jury that gave a special prize to a movie I was in called Rocket Science. So I kind of knew her, and I knew that she knew of me, which is always a slightly nicer way to go into an audition room. And I really believed that the character Jessica, she's described as this popular girl, captain of the volleyball team. And I don't think of me when I think of the kind of alpha volleyball captain popular girl. So I just thought, obviously I'm not getting this job. And that kind of means that I get to just do whatever I want and just try to make a good impression on, Catherine and on the casting directors. And I think that I would have done a really bad job if I'd been trying to do my impression of the popular mean girl. So I ended up just leaning into the nervousness.
That's Edward Cohen. He's totally gorgeous, obviously.
but apparently nobody here is good enough for him. Like I care, you know? Like, I don't think that character was supposed to be funny. She was just supposed to be, like, the mean girl at school who, you know, just kind of gives Bella a hard time and, like, you know, leads her astray about, like, the vampires at school. It was hopefully like a nice break from the like life and death seriousness of the movie, because everybody else in that movie had to be playing the stakes, I mean, higher than life and death. They're like, your very immortal soul is on the line, and like good and evil. And I really just got to show up and be like, you guys are acting really weird. So I feel like I had the best possible job out of all the actors in that movie. That is not the only time in my career where I've thought, well, I'm not getting this job anyway, and that has made me do whatever I thought was right, and then I actually end up getting the job, or certainly get closer to the job than I thought that I should. So you'd almost think that happens once, certainly twice, maybe 3 times, and like you've learned that lesson. But I do think that's sort of the whole trick of performing and, like, if I may, like being a person, is that you're constantly having to relearn, I should just trust myself. I should trust my instincts. And then, like, hey, unfortunately, I am a person, and we're very badly designed creatures mentally in a lot of ways. So we're going to fall back into that push, that, like, urge to just, like, do an impression of whatever I thought Margot Robbie would do, even though, like, I couldn't do that if I tried. Up in the Air. The exact same thing happened on Up in the Air. I auditioned absolutely assuming I didn't have a, you know, snowball's chance in hell. I think one of the audition scenes was I've just been broken up with, and I'm explaining to George Clooney and Vera Farmiga, like, what I thought my life would be. When I was 16, I thought by 23, I'd be married, maybe have a kid, corner office by day, entertaining at night. I was supposed to be driving a Grand Cherokee by now. And on the page, it felt kind of heavy, kind of serious. And again, I was like, maybe it's funny, and there isn't a way to hide that some of what I'm saying is a little ridiculous and a little overwrought, and I should play it in a way where the audience is sort of in on the joke that this girl at 23 is, like, giving this whole speech about how, like, my life didn't turn out how I wanted it to and everything's, like, ruined. I mean, I think the director said, like, that's sort of literally what got me the job, was that it was like, oh, nobody else did it that way, and I guess he sort of wanted them to. If I'd thought that, like, I was really gonna be in the running, I think I would have screwed it up, because I would have been like, oh, well, then I have to be, like, the most serious actrice, you know? Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It's been over a year since you got dumped by she who will not be named, so are you legitimately moving on, or is this just you being insane?
Can I get back to you on that?
I do remember reading the script for Scott Pilgrim versus the World. First of all, it was holographic, because they were so worried about the script leaking that they made the pages so that you couldn't actually take a photo of it without, like, it wouldn't read on, like, any camera. So that sort of made it extra challenging to read. But I do remember thinking, if I just got this script in a vacuum, I would be like, I don't get it. I think that Edgar is so good at taking genre things that feel like they're not gonna make sense. Like in Scott Pilgrim, it's action, comedy, musical, drama, and making it feel like it makes perfect sense.
If you want to fight me,
What?
ha, you're not the brightest. You won't know what's hit you.
I think because I was new to the set, I had not filmed a bunch of action sequences already, and I wasn't really in the world, and I was like, maybe someone should be reacting to this as though this is the weirdest bullshit they've ever seen. And so when we did my close-ups, I was like, I think that I should be kind of the voice of the audience going like, what's happening? And I felt very, like, pleased with myself about the fact that I think because I was, like, confused about what the movie was going to be that I was like, maybe the best thing to do is just like act confused. I think it served some purpose in the scene to sort of be saying, this is crazy, but like, we're going to get there together. Like, come on in. The water's fine. 50-50.
Maybe today we just start with some simple relaxation exercises.
Yeah, I'm relaxed.
I know you are. But just humor me. If you want to lie down.
Oh, lie down?
Yeah. That was like one of probably the first movies that I ever was just offered where like I didn't audition. I was like, oh, I think that they would be totally happy with me just basically being Natalie from Up in the Air again. Because like that had just come out. I'm certain that's why I got the offer to do the movie. So I was like, I think that that's maybe would be perfectly fine. But I also think that I could do something different and hopefully nobody's mad at me about it. And you know, I think the characters probably have some crossover, but there's like this sweetness to Catherine. She's a lot more vulnerable than Natalie from Up in the Air. And but I also just remember Joe Gordon-Levitt kind of just blowing me away. First of all, because I think the first thing we shot together was this scene in the car where it's sort of where the audience is realizing that he's kind of got a crush on me.
Cell number, just if you need anything, you have it.
Thanks. Did I just like score your digits?
No,
No. That was a joke.
that's fine.
And I remember thinking like, oh my God, when we're rolling, there is part of me that's like, well, he's in love with me. I mean, I guess I'm just that girl, you know? Sorry, stay mad, haters. Because he was so talented and he was so connected to, you know, his character, and his character was so connected to my character. So, you know, I was sort of like, oh, I'm gonna hang around this guy as much as I can. But I think the most impressive thing to me was I could sort of see, I couldn't really put it into words, but I knew that I was seeing someone who was really thinking about the arc of the movie and not just what is the truth of my character in this scene. And I think I really value that. Like, I think there's different schools of thought about acting and like whether or not you should be thinking about the audience or the viewer or, you know, even the story as a whole, or if you should just sort of be in your truth. And I kind of always wanted to be the kind of coworker, really, who was trying to be conscious of everybody else's job, whether that's the focus puller or the director. I wish I could put it into words. It was this kind of ineffable thing where I could just see the way that Joe was adjusting to tell the story and was taking that into account. And I remember being like, oh, that's the kind of performer that I want to aspire to be. End of watch.
I did go through your wallet. I'm sorry. I am naturally curious. I hope that's okay. Gotta love a guy who has a picture of his mom in his wallet.
I loved making End of Watch so much. I mean, I loved the movie, I loved the script, but really making it was so beautiful. And I think that women in the entertainment industry, actresses, there's a lot of times where you get a script and it's like the line that you hear is like, oh, but your character is really the heart of the movie. And you're like, no, I'm just like the wife or girlfriend and I don't really do anything other than like nag my, you know, my detective or entrepreneur boyfriend about how he's spending too much time at work. This was actually one of those movies where I was like, oh yeah, this relationship is really at the heart of the movie. I think that so much of that movie was improvised because it was all like supposed to be found footage. Even when the like, you know, found footage style cameras would stop rolling and like the camera operator would need to reset or whatever, they just constantly had like camcorders around and we'd just pick them up between takes and just film like whatever. So like by the end of it, you're sort of having to remind yourself that, like, oh, I shouldn't be holding his hand because actually nothing's rolling. But it would, like, you'd get into this rhythm of, like, acting like you're really in a relationship and that this person is really your friend. And, like, it was like this kind of really immersive experience. And I remember the day that we shot the funeral scene, just, like, having to spend so long crying. Like, it's like 14 hours of just crying, and there's basically no cutting and resetting because, like, something is always filming. And, like, the headache I had, you would have thought that I'd been binge drinking because you are just, like, getting yourself so dehydrated. And I think afterwards, I think Jake was like, yeah, we should, like, all go out to dinner because that was, like, a really, you know, intense day. And I was like, stop talking. I can't even, I'm closing my eyes and I'm getting an Uber and I'm going home. Cause, like, I think that's probably the closest thing I've ever had to, like, a debilitating hangover. I wasn't even drunk. I mean, where's the fun in that? Into the Woods.
The festival lasts 3 nights. Surely you can let me be there for one of them.
The king is trying to find his son a wife, not a scullery maid. We must be gone!
I'll say that a thing that happened both in rehearsals, during filming, and then all during, you know, doing press for Into the Woods is that people would come up to me and say, I think it's so interesting that they cast you as Cinderella. And I would be like, what the fuck does that mean? And then I would go, oh, that's why. Right, yes, got it. Because, you know, Cinderella, you think sort of polished and pretty and presentable, even when she's, you know, in rags and she's a servant, she's just like got this good heart. And I'm a little abrasive.
Come, little birds, down from the eaves and the leaves, over fields, out of castles and ponds.
I mean, being so nervous, I was practically paralyzed. I was one of those people in rehearsals who was kind of like hiding behind my sheet music. And I remember Sondheim, that's so weird to be like, I remember Sondheim telling me, he was like, you know, she talks to birds. And I was like, okay, I got it. I got you. Because again, it was almost like, okay, she does have this big, warm presence in a way, but she's also like kind of nuts. Like this woman either does or thinks she can communicate with birds. So yeah, having that sense of play was nice. And it was like very nice to have Stephen Sondheim tell me that. That was kind of a, you know, one of those like career highlight type moments.
Like she had to raise them in the first had to raise them in the first
You raised the beans in the first place.
Your fault.
You're responsible. You're the one to blame. It's your fault.
And then, you know, you're working with Meryl Streep and you're wondering like, well, I'm gonna, you know, soak it all in. I'm gonna learn everything I can. And there's almost like two extremes where on the one hand, you get to watch the process up close and personal, and it would be sort of impossible to put it into words. And on the other hand, there was a day where I think we were in the recording phase. We were at like a recording studio, and I happened to find myself, you know, just like alone with Meryl, just, you know, act normal. And I don't remember how it started, but she literally goes, you know, when you're in your close-up, that's what matters. Your close-up is where you take your truth. That's where you... And someone walks in and was like, Meryl, just so you know, the tea, they've put Manuka honey out. And she was like, oh, wonderful. And she gets up. And I was like, oh, no. Because I could never be like, what is that you were saying about... Sorry, it sounded like you were about to say, like, 3 easy steps to becoming the best actress in the world who ever lived. Could we go back there? Like, I knew I could never do that. But it was, like, the most unbelievable timing. I was like, oh, I'm gonna burst a blood vessel in my eye. This is insane. I can feel my heart rate is up just thinking about it. Alas. I don't know. I wish I could say. I wish I could tell you. But, you know, there was Manuka honey. So who are we in the face of Manuka honey? No one. Mr. Right.
Get off of me!
Live in the air now. It's silent.
I'll let you out later.
I never
I lied to you. I mean, what do you want from me? I'm here. That's real.
I don't know though, cause you show up and like you're like the greatest thing ever, and then you kill people. And this guy's from the FBI, but then he's not from the FBI, and I don't know. It's just overwhelming. The movie Mr. Right, like it didn't make a lot of noise when it came out, and then I do get like a ton of comments about that movie. People will like discover it and be like, how did I not know that this movie existed? You know, I think it's like one of those movies where you're like, for a movie that did so poorly, there's way too many people asking about a sequel, which is always delightful. But I remember, you know, thinking, well, this is probably my only chance to be an action star. I think that was on the scale of like buttoned up to crazy. I think Martha from Mr. Right is probably the biggest lunatic that I've played.
Did you just call me Monster?
Yeah, it's like a nickname, like Marth, Marster, Monster, that sort of thing.
Yeah, into it. Worth noting that nicknames are supposed to happen like organic over time, but...
Okay, I could say it like 1,000 times in 10 minutes. Monster, 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 monster.
Yeah, just Stockholm Syndrome.
I love that album.
It's better than Agatha.
I mean, part of the reason I wanted to do it is because I wanted to work with Sam Rockwell. I mean, Sam would have chemistry with a light bulb or like a cardboard box or something. I think that when one character is like a little nutty, there's almost there's usually like a pull, just a natural pull to kind of like turn into the straight man. And with this movie, it was almost like, I think the kids of today would say that is somebody gonna match my freak? So that was very much the vibe of that movie, was like, oh, these two weirdos couldn't be with anyone but each other. So yeah, like watching Sam be just kind of like insane and be so charming while doing it was like, okay, I'm gonna have to figure out how to be just as insane and just as charming. No problem. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of times in my career where I'm like, I think the other person did so much of the heavy lifting, and I was just there, and I was just trying to like mirror, you know, some of what he was doing or like compliment some of what he was doing. And then I got to kill some people, and that was awesome, because I don't usually get to do parts like that because I am 5'2". But yeah, that was really fun. Trolls. Okay, people, here we go! I would guess that if you saw the video footage that they take for the animators while you're recording, which I always forget is there, which is embarrassing. I think it's like a lot of like kind of hands up, because she's so tiny and she's so adorable and full of energy. I think it's that like cute aggression. It's like when you see a picture of a kitten and you just wish you had a bunch of bubble wrap that you could just, So that's sort of like where Poppy's at all times. And the animators do incorporate a lot of your facial expressions into it, so much so that a friend of mine once said to me, oh, you just pulled such a Poppy face right now. And I was like, did I pull a Poppy face, or her face is my face? I mean, put some respect on my name. What the hell?
Oh, right, like you knew I was coming.
Yes, I figured after the third hug time, getting eaten by a Bergen wouldn't seem so bad.
And I figured there was no way you could do this by yourself. Guess we were both right.
All right, let's do this. I think I was an NSYNC fan. I think I was one of those girls that was like, wanted to be a little bit too cool for boy bands. But I was just talking to someone about this the other day, that they were like, oh, I was a Backstreet person. And I was like, I think I was an NSYNC person. They hired me, and then later on, they hired Justin, and it was like, they had also asked him to be the music supervisor, and they like came to me and they were like, what do you think about that? Is that cool with you? As though I was gonna be like, I don't know, guys. So it was like, yeah, that's very exciting. Like, you know, one of the most talented recording artists is gonna be like, well, I guess it was also a little scary, because, you know, he would be there he like was the vocal producer, so he was there watching me sing. But that was nerve-wracking, but very, very cool. A simple favor.
Did you just take my picture?
I'm yearbook mom.
Did I ask you to take my picture? Erase it.
Oh, you look really chic. It's just for faces and places. It's just for the other parents.
Erase it, or I slap a fucking injunction on your yearbook. Do you understand?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, honestly, that was another one, like Scott Pilgrim, where you're like, this feels very contradictory and like, I'm not totally sure what the tone is. So every day you were kind of like, I hope this is something that is close to what he wants. And like, really, it wasn't until I saw the finished movie that I was like, oh, holy shit. Because the entire time you're going like, well, you know, this is like a murder mystery movie. And are we playing the murder mystery like it's funny? Because it's a comedy movie, but are the murders funny like we're in the movie Clue or something? And then you see it and you're like, I don't know how this man made this work, but I've really never seen anything quite like it. And I really like hats off to him, because you really think that so many of the scenes are so funny. I guess it wasn't so much like flipping a coin and trying to figure out like, are you gonna play this serious and am I gonna play this serious? Like it was almost sort of like doing like a little bit of a grab bag in take one and then just like, you know, coiling and waiting for Paul to give us direction. It was really like an exercise in trust, because there were so many times where it was just like, I don't know how this is gonna work. And then, you know, just being like, okay, I guess I'll just sort of trust fall and do, you know, go off of Paul's direction, and then, you know, just spend the evening in bed going, did that scene work today? Just staring up at the ceiling. So yeah, that was about it. And then like a year later I saw the movie and I was like, oh great, oh fantastic. Woman of the Hour.
The one thing I've learned is, no matter what words they use, the question beneath the question remains the same.
All right. What's the question?
Which one of you will hurt me? You just asked it clearer than most.
I actually just recently kind of put something together, which is that I think I was had like a passing interest in true crime, like as I think many people do. And then, you know, some things went down in my life. I got out of an abusive relationship, and I noticed that when I would come across true crime content, I would be really, really consumed by it. I think the thing that kicked it off was the Chris Watts case. You don't see any warning signs, and then they just are not the person that you thought that they were. That desire to figure out why dangerous people do what they do, and to figure out if there's a way to keep yourself safe, ended up making true crime a lot more compelling to me. There was almost something that happened when I signed on to do the movie where I would find myself wanting to get deeper and deeper into this killer and what was going on with him and what made him tick. And I would kind of get obsessive about it and then realize not only is that not gonna get me anywhere, I don't think that's what matters to the viewer either. And that staying with the experience of the people who are impacted by these things, the victims, the women that were, you know, so changed by their, you know, unfortunate proximity to this person, that's really where any answers and any healing would actually lie. I feel kind of embarrassed about this, but I think that I jumped onto this moving train where like I was pitching myself to direct, and then 6 weeks later I was in Canada like doing hard pre-production, and it was like kind of the worst circumstances you could attempt to be a first-time director in. But I also think, like, if I'm being honest with myself, I think that there was part of me that was doing that so that if it was a total disaster, I could tell myself that it would have been fine if the circumstances hadn't been so difficult. Like, on the one hand, I am kind of a psycho and I do like a challenge, and sometimes I do think like I make things harder for myself on purpose, and I don't know what that's about. I know that if the movie had shot in like 6 months down the line, I would have been like, I'm not the person, like you should get someone with more experience, like they'll know how to do it better. And it was almost like, well, I wouldn't be able to back out if I pitched myself to direct this movie. Like I think I know a secret about this script that maybe the writer doesn't even know. Like a very weird feeling of like, I just feel so connected to something about this story, and it feels so emotionally resonant to me that I think that, you know, hopefully we can make something like entertaining, compelling, let's say, and have something that that might have meaning to the viewer, because I know that it has meaning for me.